Good evening and welcome to the Lowell Planning Board for Thursday, April 21st, 2016. Tonight we have 3 public hearings on, and we have 2 that have requested a continuance. So if the board has no objection, I'd like to take those matters out of order, if there's no objection.
I have none.
You have none from the board? Okay, so the first matter is 374, 386 Chelmsford Street, site plan review. This matter was before us at the last meeting, and we did receive a letter from the applicant requesting that we continue it to May 2nd, so they can work with planning and development and also the neighbors on the matter. What's the wish of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to grant the request to continue to the May 2nd Planning Board meeting.
I'll second the motion.
Motion made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes. That motion carries. The next matter we have is for Florence Road, and we have a letter here by Attorney George Theodorou, who's here tonight as well, and the letter is requesting for continuance to the May 16th date. Is that correct, Counselor? That's correct. Okay. Any board members in favor of the continuance to let them work the matter out? And I think they go to CBA as well. They're going to do that first, I think. Is that what you're going to do, George? Correct. Okay.
We also have a neighborhood meeting next week,
Okay.
28th.
All right. So I'll make a motion to continue to May 16th.
I'll second the motion.
Motion made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carried. Okay. I think that completes our agenda. Okay, so now, I don't know if you heard me, I said that completes our agenda. So we got 42 Wilman Street, which was continued from our last meeting. This is the application by Connector Park Equity Partners, LLC, seeking site plan review and special permit approval for the proposed 6-story building to contain 240 residential units. The site currently features 289,778 square feet of land. The applicant proposes to construct 452 parking garage and 46 additional parking spaces at grade for a total of 498 parking spaces to serve the proposed use. The proposed project is located in the high-rise commercial zoning district and requires site plan review at the planning board under section 11.4.2 of the Lowell zoning ordinance. We were here 2.5 weeks ago. We had the presentation by the applicants. They gave us a new set of plans. We had those plans referred to planning staff, and there were some comments that have exchanged hands since our last meeting on April 4th. At the end of the meeting, there was a motion to continue to tonight's meeting. So at this point in time, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening.
Board members, George Theodorou Jr., 133 Market Street, Lowell. Here for our continued hearing on the Connector Park 42 Wellman Street property. So I just want to do a brief sort of opening and to refresh everybody's memory and maybe give you a few other pieces that I didn't get a chance to talk before, and then we'll have our folks give you some materials that we hope will be the answers to many of the questions that were asked at the last meeting. So, as you know, we're talking about a 240-unit market rate apartment building. And not only, I said it the last time, but I want to make it loud and clear so that everybody knows it, not one penny of federal, state, or local money of any kind will be used to assist in the financing. This is a totally private finance thing, so no strings attached by any agency that you must do this or can't do that and have so many. It's a clean-cut market rate project. When the folks, this project is on property owned by my clients, where I think you know there are what most people refer to as 2 towers. I'm not sure that they quite qualify as a tower, but that's what they're referred to generally in the city as the Twin Towers. When they bought this property, those buildings were in disarray, basically. They had had problems. They came in and spent quite a bit of money and worked hard to try to get the place fully tenanted. It isn't yet fully tenanted. And I'm saying that because one of the considerations when they decided what they wanted to do with the rest of the property they owned, was they realized that there was no great call at this point, demand for office space on that location. So in light of that and the surveys and studies they did, they also realized that in that area are a lot of working folks. In that area, there are people who work in places like Cross Point, young millennials and whatever, who are now used to more of what you would call the live-work situation. I want to live where I work. I live near where I want to work. I want to be part of a neighborhood. I want to be green. I don't want to drive a car a long way. I don't want to waste a lot of money on gas. I want to be able to move around, either walk or ride a bike or something. And this appeared, because it's really in its own separate location, to be a perfect spot for them. So they set out to have some plans done, and they hired first-class architects and engineers who did just a wonderful job. I think we all acknowledge, have already said, what a beautiful set of plans these are. Everyone I show them to, everyone who's seen them, everyone who talks to them, loves them. Probably the biggest thing I hear from people in the city and in the neighborhood is how much are the apartments going to be? What are they going to look like? Can I get my pickup truck into the garage? Will the ceiling be high enough and whatever? This is a perfect place for, and I think I mentioned this in some material I mentioned to you before. That I submitted to you at the last meeting. It's a perfect place for example, old folks like me to sell their home and get into a nice, close by to their neighborhood where they spent all their life, place where they can downsize and still enjoy the neighborhood, but not have to have all of the headaches and worries that go with ownership. But that's even a double benefit, because what we're doing is we're opening up places where their children and their grandchildren can find houses, in this case in the Highlands, to be able to move into. So I just have to touch upon, you gentlemen know I gave you the tax impact, the income benefit impact study that was done. And I didn't really get into any detail with it. I put a few notes down. I don't think I talked about it before. It has become something of note these days. But I think it's very important to understand, because people are saying, well, what kind of income? We need this and we need that. Well, first of all, this is the property owned by my clients, and they have to decide for that parcel of land what's the best thing, and they think they've come up with that. This project will generate over $720,000 of new income, tax income for the city. Real estate taxes, excise taxes for a couple of hundred or more cars that will come into the city coffers. On the expense side, we minimalize it in the sense that it's a much smaller area that police, fire, and anybody have to deal with. If you compare the 240 units in one place to 240 units throughout the city that the police would have to run around to, the fire or whatever, you'll note, and I'm sure you've all read the impact study, you'll note there's a big difference because of that. $500,000 in immediate payments for permits to the city of Lowell, fresh, new cash that will help to reduce the tax rate in the city. And on top of that, people living in that area, spending money on a daily basis in that area, whether it be to go to a restaurant, go to a supermarket, go to Lowe's, go across the way to Target and places like that. The estimates by the expert put that number in the $3 million or more category of additional spending, $3.8 million, going into coffers of local businesses, those businesses on Chelmsford Street that have the pizza shops, the car fix shops, and all of those kinds of things. Anyway, I don't want to spend a lot more time on that. I know what you're more anxious to hear is some answers to what I think were the two pressing questions that we were left with at the last time. One of them being, what are we doing about the sidewalk so that we can have pedestrians go out to Chelmsford Street? And the other was for the access and egress. And I know you said it, and I know we did it. I think I can say that. We have to find a way to get out the back door, or however you want to do it, and I think that's been done. So I'm not going to say anything more. I'm going to start and have Peter Bartash start to answer one of those questions. Then Mr. Foley, Smith, our engineer, will give you more information, and then we're all going to be around to answer questions for you. So thank you, and I'm going to give Peter the floor now.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much. I just want to talk quickly about one specific point. I know Mr. Boyle spoke, I think correctly and accurately, about the need to reconsider a pedestrian access point on the southwestern side of the project, closest to the Wellman Street extension. And so from our last meeting till now, I'm going to talk just very briefly about what that meant for the project. So what we needed to do is to consider how the project met up with grades at that location on this side of the site, and then to see whether or not it made the most sense to try to create an access point using the stair from within the garage, or to actually create an access directly from the building itself. So what you're looking at here is a pedestrian ramp or bridge, effectively, that extends out from the project. It does slope up to grade slightly, because or down to grade, I should say. The elevation of the building here is slightly above the elevation of grade here at this location across the retaining wall. And so now we have a pedestrian bridge that has a little bit of an entry vestibule, security vestibule, that has an open outside door, and then the inside door, which is access controlled, that'll allow you to walk directly across onto grade. You can see that we've gone and taken and replaced this parking spot here, removed it in order to accommodate that ramp connection, and then extended that pedestrian walkway, across the parking lot and back to the location of the new sidewalk that's running up Wellman Street extension and up Wellman Street. So effectively what we've really done here is to kind of complete the network for pedestrians into and out of the building that would allow residents of the project to utilize this connection if needed to get to and from the project, versus having to come all the way down into the leasing and kind of management area, which is on the southeastern side of the project. So we're really trying to improve that connectivity, as it was pointed out in the last meeting, and trying to make that a really positive feature of the project. And now Roy Smith is going to talk a little bit more about what those connections mean as they translate up and along Wellman Street.
Thanks, Peter. Good evening. My name is Roy Smith. I work for R.J. O'Connell. We're the site civil engineers for the project. And as Peter was, I'm going to elaborate a little bit further as it relates to this new pedestrian access into the actual apartment building. This elevation actually comes in at the third floor of the apartment complex. If you recall correctly, this is an existing retaining wall that is remaining. At this point in height, it's about 20 feet high. Down here, this pedestrian access here and down here comes into the second floor of the apartment complex and the parking deck. So this grade is highest at this location, and then it tails down to be 11 feet difference. And then this is the lower existing parking field in the at grade, or the first floor, of the apartment complex. So from a grading perspective, there was some challenges on where to locate this new pedestrian entrance and access way into the apartment complex. And it's actually a bridge, as Peter was mentioning, from the south side of the retaining wall into the proposed building unit. It actually spans about 10 or 12 feet in length to make up that grade break of the height of the wall. So it was a little bit challenging. We're gonna have to do some regrading. As Peter was mentioning, we're losing 2 parking spaces overall. We're losing, excuse me, we're losing 1 on the north side abutting the retaining wall, and then we're losing 1 on the north side of Wellman Street extension. So we're losing 2 parking spaces overall of the surface parking. The surface parking was 46 spaces, it's now 44 spaces. We still meet the zoning requirements for parking required. And one of the comments, we used to show the Wellman Street to Chelmsford Street sidewalk on the south side of Wellman Street extension. One of the comments was, why don't we try and switch that to the north side? And I wish I could zoom in a little bit better. Here we go. So this is a rotated plan. This is the parking deck here. This is the new pedestrian entrance in access way. That's the loss of the 2 parking spaces. So the sidewalk was on the south side of this plan previously, but based on the comments received at the last planning board meeting, we decided it made sense to relocate that sidewalk all the way up the north side of Wellman Street, have some crosswalks, handicap ramps, and so forth and so on, and continue that sidewalk on the residential side of Wellman Street all the way to the existing sidewalk at Chelmsford. It makes a lot of sense. That way it reduces the pedestrian vehicular conflicts crossing Wellman Street extension and Wellman Street itself. It keeps them all on the proposed residential side and the existing residential side of the complex. With that said, I think that about does what was requested at our last planning board meeting. And I'm going to turn the floor back over to George, and obviously we're available for comments and questions. We have the whole team here moving forward.
Well, Mr. Chairman, rather than me going on and talking some more, I'd rather concede the floor to the board to ask any questions for these things and while they're up there and fresh in the minds of everybody.
Sure. Why don't we start with the traffic engineer comments, since we have Nick here tonight? And I know we've seen the list of that, I'm sure you, so if we could go with that, and then, we'll just touch base with the other city department comments, okay?
You want our traffic engineer now?
Sure, I know Nick prepared, what's the date on his? I'm sorry.
April 3rd.
April 13th. Do you have a copy of that, or, yeah, do you want to just touch base on that? I think, and if anything has changed since then, let us know. But let us start with that, because I think from the begin with, that was one of the questions with, whether Lowe's Way was going to be built up to be a public way, or whether it's going to be accepted as a street, and there was a question that's been at the last 2 meetings. We had Nick here the last time, then we got the plans at the last minute, so I know Nick had a chance to look them over, so if we could start with that, 'cause I think that has been one of the most highlighted items that we've all referred to in the past.
We might all better understand if Nick could tell us what his changes are, and then he can tell us what his comments to those are, if that's permissible with the board.
Well, he has, what? I don't know, he has one, from April 13th, he gave a pretty good detailed list of 6 different recommendations. I don't know if you had a chance to review those, if you concur with those, or,
Well, here's
Nick
my,
doesn't have to read them out, I think we all have a copy of them, we can,
if I may,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, here's my concern. An awful lot of what Mr. Bolsonado's comments are relate to numbers and rides and things like that. I think he, for example, I don't understand why, and maybe he can explain to me and to the board, who Why all of a sudden, after spending all of his time telling us there should be a sidewalk up Wellman Street to Chelmsford Street, he's now changed that and deleted it and wants to have a sidewalk run the entire distance from the site to Industrial Avenue? These are the things I don't understand, why all of a sudden this change is made. And maybe if he could explain that to us, we would have a better idea of
Well,
what that's
let me
all
ask you
about.
this. On the April 7th, 13th, do you have those set of comments from Nick? The April 13th dated one?
I'm sorry.
Do you have his report from April, dated April 13th?
I do,
Okay.
yes. I do.
So, I mean, the first part is about findings. Then the second part, he has recommendations 1 through 6.
Well, that's fine. If you,
I'm just asking, do you have any questions on questions 1 through 6? Or do you say, I agree with a couple, I disagree with a couple, or, so let me just fine tune it down to what you agree with, what you don't agree with, and then we can hash it out from there?
That's
I mean, he has
fine.
6 recommendations. Which
we'll
ones
have
can you
Jim-
live with, and which ones you have objection to?
Jim Wynn is glad to do that. I
Okay,
just
sure.
thought it
I mean, that
might
way it's
make
easier for us,
more
because we
sense.
read them all.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure which ones you're like, okay, yeah, we can adhere to that, which ones you can't. Because I know he gave us findings first, and then 6 recommendations.
Right. Good evening. Just for the record, my name's Jim Wynn. I'm here representing Ron Mueller and Associates. And yeah, I was just suggesting that. I didn't know if you wanted to have his presentation, but I'm more than happy.
Sure.
We have reviewed it.
Okay.
I do have responses, so I'll be more than happy to give
Sure,
that.
I mean, that way we can go
Sure.
back and forth,
Yep.
and then we have Nick to hear to.
Absolutely.
I think that's why we have Nick here.
So, as discussed, we did review the comments, and we found all of the comments in that letter, things that we have discussed, things we have rebutted to, and things that I've actually even presented to this board. So I'll go through a little bit of the details. So, based on that, I could summarize it really into 4 key points. He talked about trip generation, accidents at Chelmsford and Wellman. He talked about improvements, and then capacity operation. So talk quickly about trip generation. And again, just to reiterate, and I know I had presented at the last hearing, and I'll state it again, the traffic study we prepared it in conformance with state guidelines, as well as typical traffic engineering practice. With that, the first one, trip generation, we use standards, standard practice, used apartment land use code for a known variable, which was units. As presented before, we felt that conservative, being that there is public transportation use, office use, and retail use, all within walking distance. I think it's fair to say, based on the comments I've heard, that it's agreed to, that this has benefit of pedestrian mixed use, as we are providing a lot of sidewalk mitigation, crosswalks, access points. So I feel, in addition to using that standard engineering practice, we were conservative and not taking any credit for public transportation and shared use. For accidents, my first presentation to this board, I had mentioned that we looked at mass highway data. We had found 3 accidents at the intersection of Chelmsford and Wellman over a 3-year period. There was some concern on that number. We had gone to the police department. During that time, they had told us there wasn't any, which appears, I guess it's a little difficult to look at the data. The city traffic engineer went and re-looked at it and found 4 over a 3-year period. So based on that finding, I find our original presentation to be close to what, as I mentioned, it was 3 accidents over 3 years. He found 4 accidents over 3 years, a little different time period. I think that's consistent on what we presented in the traffic study. He did mention a mass highway cluster area with 18 accidents. And as we presented in a traffic review or a response letter, it is not only at this one location, it is a cluster. It actually, based on review, it actually included the driveways at the adjacent plaza. So it is not only specific to that intersection. For improvements, we described tonight all the sidewalk improvements, the roadway improvements, We looked at that Lowe's Way extension, and I did mention before how we tried to make it more of a public way feel. And I think we presented that in the plans we provided to you. We made significant sidewalk improvements to allow this shared use. And as I presented at the last hearing as well, we proposed some striping and some improvements at the intersection of Wellman and Chelmsford Street. And the last comment I was mentioning was about capacity. And as I stated earlier in this, that I feel that our numbers are to standards. That's a typical engineer standards, land use code for this use, plus a known variable. That's what we used, did not take any credit for share trips, and applied that to the traffic volume network. And with those numbers, as presented before and into the traffic study, we found no significant impact and no deficiencies as a result of this project. So just to conclude, we believe a traffic engineer peer review would concur with the use of state standards and industry practice for preparing these traffic studies. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so recommendations 1 through 6. Do you accept those?
So recommendations, I can go through those. So these are with the improvements, and I will, actually, George, you want me to turn that over to you on those specifics? So this is all the,
May I just run these by my client? Can we take a
Sure.
short
Yeah,
recess? so
no
that we
problem.
can
okay.
Yeah.
Make sure
You
we're
can
all
take 5 if you want. Yeah, I just
I
want
wanna make
to
sure we're all on the
make sure
same
we're trying to
page.
follow
All right,
everything.
which one is, yeah.
So we have a
thank
lot
you.
of data here. Okay. So we'll be in recess for 5 minutes.
Starting to send out applications again because my son goes to full-day school in the fall.
You used to work for Lowell?
Yeah, I used to be the neighborhood planner.
That was the fastest 5-minute break I've ever asked for, Mr. Chairman. So we can wait for Mr. Lockhart to show up, but I just wanted to tell you that we determined that we determined that the best way to do this would be to have our engineer and Rob, who's our principal, Mr. Hawkins, together go over line by line with you folks. Perfect. Thank you.
All right, so we're back on the record. Go ahead, please. So we're focusing on now, on Nick's report on April 13th, and he had 6 recommendations. We just wanted to see what your response is to those recommendations, if we could.
Yep, so I'll read through line by line, and we can discuss as we go through.
Okay, either that, or you can say, I agree with one, 1, 3, 5, or 4, and you don't have to do the A through Gs if you don't want, or whatever, that's fine.
Okay, well, if okay, I'd like to read through them so the
Sure,
team
no
knows
problem,
exactly what we're
no problem.
describing, and so the board and
Yeah,
city
that's
knows.
fine.
Okay,
Whatever
so the
you're
first one,
comfortable
the private road from the terminus of Lowell's Way to the subject parcel should be improved in the following manner. It has A through G. A is install sidewalks on the west side, and there's an exhibit plan, Exhibit 1, the sidewalks in green. Based on that, we don't agree on extending that, and the plan shows it, the sidewalk extended all the way to Industrial Way, and I think we had presented previously that we were not going to provide that sidewalk all the way to Industrial Way.
Did you say you were or you weren't? I'm sorry.
We're not going to extend it all the way to, we're proposing the sidewalk as
I'm sorry, what's the last
building
part of that? You
59 as
proposing
previous.
what?
We're
Proposing it to where?
to building number 59 as previously presented on an improvement plan.
We didn't make any change. We're extending the sidewalk along the
Yeah,
west
to
side.
building 59, I got it.
Yep,
Okay.
259,
Okay,
as presented in the previous exhibit
yeah,
plan.
we got you, okay.
B was remove perpendicular parking on both sides and replace with parallel parking. And I believe, Rob,
We agreed to do that on the
West side.
west side. The parking on the east side is handicapped. We'd like to keep it the way it is, closest to the building.
For a couple of reasons, and there's some handicap spaces on the east side, and if you look at that detail, there's also some visitors parking. Both the handicap, the recent request was to eliminate those spaces and turn them to be parallel. We want to keep the handicap parking abutting the building from safety purposes. That way they won't have to cross Lowell's Way. And the handicap parking and the visitors parking combined is not frequently used, especially in the peak travel hours. So we'd like to keep those spaces as they are shown on the previous exhibit plan. We feel eliminating those handicap parking and moving them across the parking lot makes the handicap accessibility a little bit less safer than what's proposed under the current plan.
C is to install crosswalks, pedestrian signs, and ADA compliant ramps as shown. We agree to that? Yep. D is to paint a double yellow center line, which we agreed to that. E is to paint shoulder lines, solid white lines, to mark 11-foot lanes, which we agreed to. F is install necessary stop signs and stop bars. We would agree to that. G is replace sloped curb with vertical granite curb next to the proposed sidewalk.
Again, next to the proposed sidewalk as shown on our original exhibit plan, not extending the sidewalk down to Industrial Ave. We feel that sidewalk's not going to be used, and it will allow us some flexibility when and if the Freeman Trail project comes into play, how to connect to that Freeman Trail in the future. We do have frontage on the former railroad bed. If you go to, I don't have the plan in front of me, but we do have some frontage on the former railroad bed, which is where the Freeman Trail is planned to be. And it's actually to the east side of 59 Lowell's Way. So I think providing the sidewalk down Lowell's Way extension is not advantageous to future planning efforts that where the connection to the future bike path is going to be in the future. It's at the south, our connection to the former railroad right-of-way is at the southwest corner, the southeast corner of our property. We have about 200 feet of frontage. If you've ever been by the site and you go behind 59, the office building at 59 Lowell's Way, there's a slope down to that existing, the former railroad bed, and that would be the connection point, not up against Lowell's Way or Lowell's Way extension. So we feel it's advantageous to connect that sidewalk under this phase to 59 Lowell's Way, the office building, and then in the future, potentially extend that sidewalk to the future Freeman Trail along our frontage with the railroad bed.
All right, number 2, the private road from the terminus of Wellman Street to the westernmost driveway should be improved in the following manner. Again, reference Exhibit 1 with markups. A is to install sidewalks on the north side.
Yes, we just went over that.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that whole number 2, I think is all agreed to.
Okay.
Install necessary stop signs, replace slope granite curbing with vertical granite curbing. There's existing vertical granite curbing already on the north side. We'd remove and reset that as part of constructing the new sidewalks on the north side.
Okay, so that brings us to number 3. In lieu of making these two streets extension city streets, then it goes into A, grant easements to pass and repass through both street extensions to all property owners abutting Lowe's Way and Wellman Street.
No, we disagree with that. We'll certainly grant easements to the residents of the apartment building, so they can pass, but we don't want to grant easements to the general public.
The recommendation, though, doesn't say to the general public. It reads to all abutters to Lowe's Way and Wellman Street.
Right. Why? What do they need the access for is the question, I guess.
To be able to use that cut-through to get down to Industrial Ave and the highway, instead of going out the overburdened and potentially closed left turn out of Wellman Street.
Yeah, so you're adding more traffic into an area that you're telling us you're concerned about safety with.
Excuse me?
That would potentially be adding more traffic coming through the site where we're already concerned about safety.
I haven't heard a whole lot of concern expressed about Lowe's Way being overburdened by traffic and made unsafe, and I think that the
This is through Wellman
proposals I'm seeing on here would create quite a safe type of situation.
I think, just to elaborate on Rob's thought process, Lowe's Way cuts through the office parcel and connects to the parcel under development right now. There is an existing easement along that Lowe's Way that gives rights to the office building and this residential parcel, all right? I think what Rob is saying is we object to opening up that easement agreement, that access and utility easement, to other parties that aren't gonna own and maintain this piece of roadway. What we wanna do is we'll grant the easement, it will be in perpetuity, but it will be for the rights of the office tenants and the residential tenants to cross and recross each other's property, both to Wellman Street, public right-of-way, and Lowe's Way, which is a public right-of-way. And that's gonna be in perpetuity. And that's an existing easement that we're gonna have to redraft the legal description of that existing access and utility easement and redraft it based on the new improvements that we've made to Lowe's Way extension. And the people that have that existing rights is basically what Rob is saying is gonna maintain those rights under the new easement agreement. We're not gonna open that up to other parties that aren't privy or part of that easement, current existing easement agreement, because they don't own, they don't have the liability, they don't maintain that road. So everybody has the right to cross and recross it. It's just like a parking lot at Lowe's or any mall development. It's private property, but the roadways, anybody can go through it and access and egress and travel across it. It's just the actual ownership of the road and the actual easement rights are gonna be maintained based on the existing easement rights. If that helps.
Do customers from Lowe's currently have authority to use, okay?
Sure they do.
So-
Can I just build
Can I just
on-
stop for 1 minute, please? What I'd like to do is go through the whole list and what they have to say, have Nick respond to it, and then open up for comments for everybody else. Is that acceptable? Because if not, if we're gonna start nitpicking here, we're gonna be here for a long time. So if we can just continue to go, I'm not gonna argue about any of the things you're saying, we wanna know where you stand, where you don't, and then I'm gonna come back and ask Nick on the ones that they disagree with, what his comments are.
Okay,
Does
great.
that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So you say no to number 3A?
So 3A would be no, yes.
Yep, okay.
So
3B?
3B is remove private property and do not enter signs from both streets,
That would be no.
and that would be no. C is submit agreement binding developer and subsequent owners to maintain said street extensions, which we've already said to no to the previous one, so I think
So
that's,
number,
so C would be no.
okay.
D is submit agreement binding developer and subsequent owners to bring streets extension up to city standards. In the case, streets are dedicated to the city.
Okay. So D is
So
a,
D would be no.
okay. So we got, all of 3 is no.
Well, but we would say, right, if,
D is
All
like
the three is no,
only
yep.
because we're not
Right.
dedicating.
All of 3 is no. That's what you said. A, B, C, D. All right, well, 4.
4A, restripe Wellman Street and Chelmsford Street as shown in letter from applicant's traffic engineer dated April 4th. That we agree to. 4B, install crosswalks, pedestrian signs, and ADA ramps as shown in above referenced letter. Again, agree to that. C, install pork chop island to prevent vehicles from exiting left onto Chelmsford Street and install appropriate signage. For this one, our opinion is that left restriction out would not impact our site, so we would be okay with that. My suggestion to the city would be that to make it not binding to the decision, and that way if the city ever changed its mind, it could do it freely without changing an approval. The pork chop island, I'm not sure if it's enough room to design it to standards. I would not recommend designing something not to standards. But I think we would agree to install signs to say restriction of left turns per city direction, and whether it be a time restriction or always a left turns restriction. So for 4C, I would say we would agree with installing signs based on city direction, but would not want to include a left turn restriction as part of the condition. 5 is a reevaluation of the traffic impacts based on the trip generation figures that were provided by the city's traffic engineer. And I presented earlier our findings on that we felt the traffic generation were per industry standards and per state guidelines, and in fact, if anything, conservative based on the discussions to this board. Also include traffic impacts during Saturday. I'm sure all of you are very aware and familiar with this area. It is heavily office-based. There is the Lowe's. Our finding is that, and I presented earlier, and as I think the first and second presentation, our greatest impacts would be, we felt, in the adjacent street traffic, would be during the weekday AM and PM peak hours. I tried to find some, we tried to find, Ron Mueller and Associates tried to find some traffic volumes in the area to kind of look at the differences in traffic volumes over the weekend to the weekday. What we did find were daily traffic volumes on the Lowell connector, and based on Mass Highway data, we found Saturday daily volumes to be about 25% less, and typical to what we believe we would find on the roadways that the AM, PM peaks would be critical based on the uses around there.
Just to elaborate on that a little bit, obviously the 2 office components have a big impact to that. They're closed on Saturdays, so from a traffic analysis perspective, you want to analyze the peak traffic hours, including the office component. So that's why we did the weekday and not the Saturday counts.
And then for 6, it was make capacity improvements, the intersection of Chelmsford Street and Stevens Street and Chelmsford Street and Plain Street, and mitigate the level of service F conditions. And as I presented earlier, based on the numbers we presented, we felt conservative. There wasn't a significant impact as a result of our project. In addition, the conditions described here, the level of service Fs, were independent of our project. Deficiencies were not created as part of our proposed project.
Okay. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Nick. So, Nick, basically, we're going to start with number one. Number one, about inside the salt works on the west side, sidewalks in green. And their comments were, we're not going to do that, we're only going to do it up to building 59. What's your concern on that?
All right. Well, first of all, I would like to clarify that my comments have been consistent since my first email to the applicant on March 1st. I followed up that email. I had three concerns in that email, and that was Lowell's Way was not a public street,
Right.
the Wellman Street location, and also the traffic generation. I followed that up with my preliminary comments to the planning board. Again, with those three, we met twice, or with the applicant. Again, my comments have been consistent. And so to start out with the latest iteration of my comments, which is the April 13th letter. And again, since the beginning, I've identified the issue that these streets are not public streets. And that's an issue because what we want to create is we want to make sure that there's a traffic circulation, that we have a connected transportation network. What this would create is right now what we have is Lowell's Way is a dead-end street, and Wellman Street is a dead-end street, and then you have a lot of development in there. You have the Lowe's, you have the 2 office towers, you have this 240-unit apartment building, you have, and then whatever's on Wellman Street. So you have a lot of development in this one area, and you have 2 dead-end streets, and the connection between those 2 dead-end streets is private property. And they have signs up saying, no trespassing. So when I go up there, I'm literally trespassing. If I drive to the end of Lowell's Way, and there's nothing there, there's no turnaround, there's nothing. If you're coming up Lowell's Way, you're trespassing once you hit their property. So in an effort to rectify this issue, and also thinking in the future, how this is going to function, my first, in my March 1st email to the applicant, I suggested, you could make these public streets. Just, you could go through a subdivision, we'd be happy to help you. And I think they took that, they didn't, somehow trying to take their property. We're not. All we're trying to ensure is the connectivity of the transportation network. And that's what, recommendation 1 is all about. They don't want to get rid of they don't want to dedicate the property over to the city for the street. So I said, okay, fine, you keep it as a private road, but you should give access to the surrounding uses. That way there is that traffic circulation and that accessibility. I guess that was I guess that was comment number 3, was granting of the easements and removing the property signs, and then making sure that in some future case, that there has to be an agreement that that they're going to maintain it. Because what ends up happening is, people come to the city and say, hey, you got to maintain this street, and we tell them it's not our street. But they don't understand that. So we just want some, and Lisa DeMeo also, we want some assurances that these streets will be, if they're maintained privately, that they will be maintained. And then in any case, the city has to come in and make them a public street, that they'll be built to standards. That way we're not stuck building a street they don't want to. So that's number 3. I'm sorry, I went out of order.
Yeah, okay. So we're back on 1A and B. So
Yeah.
A was, only up to building 59, I believe. And you
Right.
wanted sidewalks on the west side to go all the way to South Industrial Way?
Yeah, well, I wanted it to go all the way to where Lowell's Way ends. Lisa DeMeo, the city engineer, wanted to go all the way to Industrial. So those are 2 separate comments from
Okay.
from
We
us.
have Lisa's next, okay.
All right, but that, we want the sidewalk because people will want to walk,
Right.
they want to walk somewhere. Right now, what they have is, not really a sidewalk, it's the front of their building and then crossing over to their other building.
Right.
Unless you're going to that building, it's kind of pointless.
It's not pedestrian friendly, and unless you work on those buildings.
Right. So it's kind of, again, connecting the system, that's what, transportation.
So what about B, remove the perpendicular parking
Yep.
on both sides? They wanted to
And-
keep it for the handicap parking.
Well, the handicap parking can stay there, it just has to be parallel. What we don't want is people backing into a street. We tend to not allow that on streets because when you have all the traffic, so we try to keep it parallel. They can have the handicap there, it's
Yeah. So you have
parallel.
no problem with the handicap?
No,
You just wanted perpendicular, and they don't want to do parallel? Okay.
no, I want to do parallel.
No, you want to do parallel, okay.
Yeah.
Because they had perpendicular, okay.
Right.
All right, so,
I think they were okay with C, D, E, and F, they were all good with.
yeah, G was the question, but replace slope curb with vertical granite curb next to proposed sidewalk, is that okay?
Right, so where I have the sidewalk going all the way down to Lowell Street Extension.
Yep.
Right now, there's sloped granite curb.
Yep.
And we don't want that next to a sidewalk, because a car can just get right on up to the sidewalk, where if you have vertical curb on a sidewalk, that prevents a car
And
from.
that's consistent what
Yeah.
the city's requested throughout any project?
Right, we would request that in any
You
development.
see it on your comments every night when we're here? Okay.
Right.
All right, so we got 2 was okay, 3 is a definite no, 4 was a yes for A and B, and number C, they didn't want the pork chop, they don't want the no turn. Can you just expand on number 4C, Nick, if you would?
Right, so the left turning, and again, the
And that came up
crash.
at the last meeting when you were present, so you heard some of those comments on that.
Right, the crashes at Wellman Street are almost all due to cars turning left out of there. And I've, the MassDOT data shows that, the Lowell Police Department data shows that. And, there's some pretty serious crashes because people turn out of there, people are going pretty fast on Chelmsford. There was even one crash with 5 cars involved. The car went into the Plaza parking lot, hit a bunch of cars there. People have to be transported by ambulance. So it's pretty significant, and I feel that this development will add even more vehicles turning left out of there, and that's it's one of the access points. And the more left-turning vehicles you have out of there, the more dangerous it gets. That's why, one of my recommendations would be just put a pork chop island, don't let people turn left, and then they would come down, Wellman Street Extension, down Low Street Extension to access industrial. But again, they don't want to allow people through those extensions.
Okay, and the last one, what was the last one? Make
Number
capacity
5.
improvements, and so 5 was no also, they're sticking to what their findings were in the analysis before, correct?
Right, and again, since my first initial email on March 1st, I've been telling them that their traffic generation numbers are too low. And traffic generation, I tried to, I included several pages in my write-up,
Yeah.
including, some statistics.
Yeah, I
and
know you have
some-
several ones,
Yeah.
one under the land use code.
Right. And, this trip generation it's not like it's a hard science where the numbers are exact. I mean, like I keep saying on here, it's not an exact science. It's, there's a lot of, the standard deviation. If you look at some of the graphs, you have numbers all over the place. So for an apartment building, you could have, if it's elderly people, low-income people, underemployed people, you're gonna get a certain number. If you have an apartment building that's built, next to the highway, it's luxury apartments, it's meant for commuters, you're gonna have a much higher number. So that's why you have to use a lot of this, you gotta think about it and use a lot of different variables. And so it's not like it's an exact science. You got to think about, the setting and all the manuals, this is the manual. It tells you that. It says you have to look at the location. That's why I think the traffic generation numbers are going to be higher. You are going to have a lot more traffic. And Saturdays are important because Lowe's, it's a home improvement store. That's when everybody goes there.
Right.
On Saturdays. So
That was one of the comments I had, by saying, your Saturday at Lowe's is the busiest day of the week.
I would say so.
I was just saying my own personal experience being there.
Yeah. So now you're going to
Like
have
the Home Depot.
2,000, you're going to have all the other trips because people living in these apartments on Saturday, they're not going to go on the Low, to work. They're going to go to Chelmsford and they're going to so they're going to be coming out Wellman Street. Again, so I think it's a problem and they haven't addressed that. I've been asking, this is 7th time I've asked now to address it. My job is not to do the traffic study for them.
I got you.
My job is to review them and give you comments. I have 7 times asked them to include these things, and
I got
they
you.
haven't addressed them. So, and finally, the capacity improvements, like I said, the intersection at Stevens, Chelmsford, and Plain, that's a level service F. You know, they say, well, it's already bad. You know, well, that does, you know, I think we could do something. Like, I think people, you know, when you bring this much traffic, I think people expect a little bit of, you know, mitigation. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Okay. Does the applicant want to go over the comments from the city engineer at this time? Or do you accept those? That way we want to do through all the comments that...
I certainly haven't had an opportunity to discuss that with my client.
Okay.
I can tell you one thing that strikes me immediately. We said from day one, we don't want to make Lowell's Way a public road for people to automatically pass and repass on. Let's not forget, right now, there are houses on Walman Street. We already heard there's probably going to be another development. Does anyone know what is adjacent to Lowell's Way across from Lowe's store and the strip mall? It's a chemical factory, chemical holding place, tank. Does that mean that if they decide for whatever reason, now I don't mean them, I'm talking if somebody decides high-rise commercial, that we all know there's a very broad way, definition of what can be done. It's commercial industrial development. If somebody wanted to put a trucking company, if somebody wanted to put a chemical company, if somebody wanted to put a taxi cab company, or whatever it is, you're asking my client to take his private way and turn it into a public way without any control over it. So if you give me 5 minutes, I'm willing to go outside and see where we are on what the engineer has said here.
Okay.
But I have a very serious concern, never mind the liability, by the way, and we're all concerned about liability. We're concerned about people walking up and down that street and whatever. So we have to be very careful about how much traffic we're putting on there. Thank you.
Okay, we'll give you another 5.
I'm sorry. Could we have a 5-minute?
Yep, you have 5 minutes, yep. Okay. talked about this back on last one.
And they can twice. Just extend it with the packet. Yeah, it was scanned and
Okay. Smaller version. Yeah, if we get the smaller one, okay. Okay,
All
back
set?
on, yep, we're all set with the memo from Lisa, the mayor, the city engineer.
Okay, so, all right. Now, I just wanted to make a report
Oh,
of our meeting, which was basically with reference to the questions you've asked, where we stand on Nicholas's statements and whatever. Two things. Number
well,
one.
we got all those. We had your response 1 through 6 in the letters, right? You said, yeah. All right, so go ahead. I mean, if you're gonna change something, but I marked down what you're in agreement for and what you're not in agreement in.
Well, I think I'm saying we're at odds with some of those things.
All right, go ahead.
And what I would like to suggest, I think you, Mr. Chairman, were headed that way, is that I'd like to suggest that we go over any and all other things like the engineer's report, the city engineer's report, and any other issues that the board feels comfortable with now, so we can get to a point where we know.
Yep.
where
That's
we
what my
all-
question was. I was gonna go through the traffic engineer, which has been the question since the pre-app. Then I was gonna do the city engineer, then I was gonna do the fire department, have everybody respond on that, then open it up to the public, then open it up to the planning board members.
And we'd like to propose that reasonable men can differ, and reasonable experts can have their own opinions or whatever. Obviously, we and you want to know what is the best thing. So we would like to propose a peer review related to the traffic situation, and we're prepared to do that, pay for it, and give you 3 names of 3 companies from which the city can choose, or 3
Okay.
engineers.
All right. So having that said, is there anything that we can address now on the city engineer?
I'm sorry, Mr.
So
Chairman.
can we move on to the comments from the city engineer now that we've addressed what the
Yes.
comments would be for traffic? Yeah,
Coming up.
okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So,
We got the revised comment letters from Lisa, dated April 20th.
Sure.
And basically, we concur with most of them. Obviously, the first one, we're working with the planning board, the city's traffic engineer, in regards to how to implement pedestrian and vehicular improvements to Lowell's Way extension. That's been discussed at length.
and that would probably fall under the peer review,
Yes.
maybe?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
all right.
correct.
So we can move on from that one,
Yep.
okay.
Sidewalk should be installed on the eastern side of Lowell's Ways. And she's saying all the way down to Industrial Ave. You've already got our comments. We feel that that would be best served coordinated with the Freeman Trail, the future Freeman Trail access.
You want to stop at building 59, and Nick wants to go to,
He wants to go to the right-of-way, I think.
yeah,
Right?
and she wants industrial Ave.
And
okay.
she wants all the way down to
So we have
Industrial
to-
Ave.
Right, so we got that, okay.
Desirable location is.
Part of the application includes the desirable look, okay, yeah, nearby, okay,
Yeah,
that's more of a
just
comment, I think, right?
It's just a general comment, I do believe.
And okay, yeah, that was more of a statement.
Yeah,
okay.
more of a statement, yeah. Bicycle travel is part of the application, access to the Freeman Trail, that's where I was leading with the whole sidewalk down Lowell's Way extension. We have actual property frontage on the railroad right-of-way, which where Lowell's Freeman Trail will be going up. We'd rather spend the money connecting to that future bike path rather than extending it all the way down to Lowell's Way to Industrial Ave, which is about 900 feet. And we feel that that sidewalk's not going to be used. We'd rather use those funds to connect to the Freeman Trail in the future, which will help bike travel and pedestrian travel throughout the area. Sidewalks, curbing, and this is where we're a little bit at odds between Nick's comments and Lisa's comments. We agree curbing on city streets shall be vertical granite curb. We're not providing city streets. We're designing them so they function as city streets, but they're privately owned and maintained. So we're at odds. We don't disagree with curbing, vertical curbing, switching the slope granite to a precast concrete curb vertical from a safety perspective, but we don't feel vertical granite curbing is needed at that location. We agree with the full panels, sidewalks, if they're constructed out of concrete, will be full panels. The detectable warning panels will be red. We're not in the historic district. That's at the handicap ramps before you go out from a protected area to an unprotected area. That's the same comment as the detectable warning pads must be installed per manufacturing regulations. We have a detail on our site plans that deals with all the detectable warnings.
So you're okay on that?
Yep.
And what'd you say about the handicap ramp? I'm sorry, on the both sides? I didn't catch that.
Yep, we're providing handicap ramps on both sides
I
of
thought I
each
checked that as a
crosswalk.
yes. Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Stormwater is.
Contact name will be submitted as part of the operation and maintenance. Construction entrance, we agree with. Location of dewatering, we agree with. Condition of erosion controls and the straw wattles versus sill fence, we agree with. We'll go with the straw wattles. And then the condition about the erosion controls matched at every weather event. I'd like to clarify that a little bit. Every weather event is a very bold term. We require what they refer to as a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit with the EPA for construction-related activities. The reporting and maintenance requirement based on that permit with the EPA is 1/4 of an inch. Every storm event, if it showers, we're not going to go out there and do a report. If it meets the criteria of doing a reporting and inspection based on the EPA, which is her last comment, the NPDS permit,
Okay,
then we have to comply with that from an EPA. It's just the broad, every storm event. If it showers out there, we're not going to go out and look at the hay bales and sill fence and all that stuff. But if it hits 1/4 of an inch and it meets the threshold of the NPDS permit, then we have to do that. We have to maintain it, inspect it, and report on it.
now I remember early on, either the last meeting or the pre-app, there was a question about Conservation Commission. Do you have to go before them?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I thought it was yes, but I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah.
So a lot of that would come up on
Yes,
her
that
comments
will.
then would be
That whole NPDS permit
Yeah,
will be.
that whole
And
stormwater
the hay bills and the stormwater and all
more
that.
intensified by them
Yep.
than us.
Yep.
I mean, I know.
That's true, yep,
I've been to those meetings, yeah.
yeah.
And I've watched some of them on TV,
Yeah.
okay.
And
I
as
think the last one is,
discussed at the
no
previous
snow
meeting.
one right away, I'm pretty sure you have no problem with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get that done. Have you had a chance to see the comments that we received today from the fire department?
Yes, I got the email from Joe, and I provided him with a fire truck turning exhibit plan in that email as a response, and I went over that at the last planning board public hearing. I probably should have given Joe a copy so he could forward that to the,
And then did fire comment on that later, Joe? I forget. I know you sent out some emails this afternoon, but I wasn't in the office for that.
Yeah, they had a brief question about it. Their question was whether or not the analysis that was done, if it was in conjunction with their largest truck. And the Deputy Chief Sharon gave me kind of a template that they utilize for essentially their largest truck to go by. So it was just a question by him whether or not the analysis was done assessing the path that would be needed for their largest truck. So that was a question that he
Did you
had.
catch that? Whether the analysis was
we
for their
provided.
largest truck?
If you look at the exhibit plan that we provided, I don't know what their largest truck is. We provided a
That was
profile.
my question next to.
Yeah. And we actually tried to contact the fire department to get what their largest truck was. So we used what's in what we refer to as a truck turning template program. And we used the largest fire truck and provided that truck profile right on our exhibit plan. So I don't know if that meets their largest truck or it doesn't meet their largest truck. I don't know where that stands, but I'd be happy to, you know, if they review that profile that's provided in that exhibit and just let me know, does it meet it or not meet it? And then I can
Because
adjust it.
you have the space to make that wider if need be to
Yes.
accommodate the fire department.
Yeah.
So if they say, it looks to me like, if anything, it would be the turn down here would be the tightest hairpin turn.
In what we can
So
do
if
there
that had to
is-
be wider, you have the land on both sides to do
Yep.
so.
And if you look at that, we are providing a 20-foot fire lane right now. We could make it 22 feet, 24 feet, or whatever it really
I
needs to
remember
be
last meeting you
to
said
get
you
that
want,
to work.
you want to make sure that it combines whatever the fire department wants.
Right, yeah.
Right, okay.
So-
So that's, can be worked, I mean,
Yeah,
that's not.
that's a minor
No,
detail, in
okay.
my opinion.
So whether they
Yep.
say make it a little wider, or if that's satisfactory, after they figure out what's their biggest size truck, they
Yeah,
have data to
exactly.
you, and, okay.
So-
We did receive wastewater comments, which was, they were in favor. I think, Joe, that covers most of the things we received from comments, right? And then we had a couple ones from staff, but I think, let me see, where did those go? Let's see. I had some from staff, I want to make sure I get the right date. There's so many comments here, I gotta keep up. Because I think the staff ones, I think, well, wait a minute. Did we have new ones since the last meeting, Joe, or was it just the ones before? I forget, I'm trying to, I got so much paper here.
Yeah, there hasn't been any new comments from any other staff other than the other ones you just mentioned, from traffic, from engineering, from wastewater, which their comment was they had no comments on it, and from fire, so there's nothing else.
Okay, yeah, I see it now, I remember reading it now, Jerry just showed me a copy, I know I have it buried in here. Okay, so now that we addressed that, I'm gonna turn it over to see if anybody here in the public wants to speak in regards to the project. Is there anybody here to say, anybody else tonight want to speak in favor of the project? In favor of the project, in favor? Hearing none, I'll turn it over, anybody at this time want to speak in opposition? In opposition, hearing none. At this time, I will turn it over to any questions of the board members. Mr. Lockhart, can I start with you? Do you have any questions, or do you want to go forward now, or?
I have one question to Nick, relative to the Wellman Street, Chelmsford Street intersection. I think it's pretty clear that, it's a dangerous area. And are there any other alternatives? And I didn't really understand, you said you'd provide signage, but we're reluctant to commit to any kind of a pork chop island. Are there any alternatives that can be looked at there? I think that really has to be addressed. There've been some bad accidents there, and people seem to have overlooked that. And that's one thing. And the Saturday traffic at Lowe's is very significant. I think you're making a mistake not considering it. So if you could just comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Short of, I guess a traffic signal there is really not warranted currently due to there's not enough traffic to warrant a signal. So short of that, I think that's why I was proposing the pork chop island, the little island, and not to allow left turns, because other than that, there's really not much more you could do.
Okay.
It's sort of limited on what we can do there.
All right. That's really all I have. I just, what really bothers me about the project is that there's a huge discrepancy between what Nick has come up with in terms of traffic volumes. There's a 62%, difference there, and that really has to be addressed, and I think that will be. But that's the biggest issue that I see tonight. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Fischett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just some comments, once again, and since the Lowe's was approved, I make it a point to buy as much as I can over there to support it, and I'm there on Saturdays. And I think one of the key things is, I think the traffic patterns change a little bit on the weekend, on Saturday. So I think it's important to acknowledge that, and incorporate that in the study. And the other thing I'm concerned about is, it was communicated that the desire is not to make this connecting roadway a roadway for the public to go down. So what you're basically doing, right now, there's a number of people on a Saturday will exit out that way and go around and go to the signalized intersection. So what you're going to do is you're creating more traffic, and you're basically saying that, matter of fact, if you had your way, those cars coming out of there wouldn't make that movement, and you'd be driving more cars towards, down Wellman onto Chelmsford Street. And I think the cluster that Nick referred to, I think that's very important, because more traffic is going to add to the potential conflicts at the plaza, at other intersections there. I mean, that's a fact. I mean, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I've been doing this long enough. That's just a fact. So I think that has to be incorporated in there. I do appreciate the petitioner offering the peer review. I think we've reached that point where I think that would be critical in a project such as this. I think it's important, Council, I think when you presented this, I may have my facts incorrect, but this is the largest residential development presented in decades, okay? Why would we not want to address this roadway properly? And I know we can have a different opinion of the proper way to address it, but I really think from just, when you talk about reasonable people sitting back looking at it, doesn't it make sense if we have a road that loops around that site, that all these properties access? I mean, doesn't that just make sense? Rather than have a private driveway servicing 240 luxury apartments that come out onto a road that accesses a rotary and then accesses a city arterial street. I mean, that's Chelmsford Street is an arterial road. And so, I mean, I think, I think that has to be looked at. I think it has to be viewed in that way. And I think to do anything short of that would be negligent of the city and the board in that respect. So, again, I think initially looking at the project, certainly I can appreciate the effort to address the concerns that were raised at the last meeting with pedestrian access to the neighborhood. I think there's been significant improvements made with that. Access through the other side of the parking garage. My question, and I looked at that from, I know there's a ramp there. There's no ADA issues with that. Is that the proper, you've got the proper angle on that? Not an issue. It looked like a 2-foot drop. Is that somewhere in there? So.
Yes, the ramp and that whole connection will be designed to comply with the ADA standards.
Right, okay. And so, I mean, certainly there's been some progress on that, but I think we can all agree this is going to be a site that's has easy access to the highway. I think people that are going to live there are going to be relying on their automobile. I mean, we're trying to create the connectivity to the neighborhood, and I think to an extent you'll see some of that. I think to an extent you'll probably see some people walking to the cinema from there. And hence, the sidewalk all the way out to Industrial Ave or Industrial Way would be conducive to that. And then you cross at the signalized intersection, and then you're right to Chili's and you're right to the cinema. And so in that respect, I think there's some merit in trying to create the connectivity. I can appreciate the keeping the options open for the Freeman bike path, but I think the options would still be there. And so from that perspective, I think one of the premier functions of zoning is the safety and welfare of the citizens. And I think that's has to be taken into consideration when we look at the access to this site. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Fischett. Mr. Boyle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peter?
Yes.
You step up? Sure. I appreciate the addition of that pedestrian ramp. I would like to get an elevation, or perhaps just an elevation detail showing what it's going to look like, what that entrance door is going to look like, and any kind of a vestibule or entrance or something, to make sure that I want to make sure I'm not trotting on your toes here. The rest of the building is so beautifully designed, it's so thoughtfully designed, it's so interesting. I want to make sure that that is built and that is designed in a way that is consistent and looks like it belongs and is designed into it, as opposed to looking like you took the building that you presented to us already and stuck a ramp on it.
Right, and our goals would be the same in that regard, so that's something we can do.
I'm sure. And as you do that, I'd hope you keep in mind this concept that we've used of front door. Okay, in many ways, I'm very liberal, even radical, but when it comes to building design, I'm quite the reactionary. I believe that a building should look like a building, and it should have a front door that looks like a front door that everybody can realize from a mile away is the front door. That's what I like in a building. The other thing, and this idea of a ramp going over that space, it made something occur to me I hadn't thought of before. That gap in between the retaining wall and the front of the building, what's that, about 10 feet?
Yes.
Okay. Now, it's going to be 10 feet wide by, 2 stories high at one end?
It's about 1.5 on one end.
Sloping down to grade?
It won't be sloping down to grade because we'll have the access point to the garage before it does eventually zero out. So it slopes down to about a half-story height at its furthest extent along the garage.
Okay. It concerns me a little bit that this is an area that in one sense is very accessible in terms of people walking right along the edge of it, people crossing over on that. But on the other hand, is actually difficult for somebody to get through. You'd have to come all the way around the building and go in that side. You wouldn't be able to get to it from the front of the building. And so I'm a little bit worried about maintenance. I'm a little bit worried about trash collecting in there. I'm a little worried about, I want to say plantings, but I don't know if you could even plant in there, about what the ground is going to be. Have you, has the team put any thought into any of this?
We've discussed it briefly about what some of the finishes and may be in that location. I know that a major component of that sort of management strategy would be a security plan or some sort of operations plan with a property manager, but we're not at that level of detail in the development of the project.
You did. Let's see. It would be the garage that would form the other side.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there going to be any door that a maintenance guy could use to go directly from the garage into there?
There is. It would be the stairwell on the southwest side of the garage that would allow you to access that location.
Okay. 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 Now, about that, what we've got, is there a stairwell at that location where the new ramp is proposed?
There's a stairwell immediately to the east of where that new ramp is proposed, yes.
Okay, good. So somebody would take the stairs and then their door is right there. It's not, they have to use the stairs on the other side and then walk all the way around on the third floor.
That's correct. And there's actually also an elevator on that end of the garage as well. So you have access to both types of vertical circulation.
Okay. You did end up, if I understood correctly, you did end up having the ramp go directly into the interior hallway of the building, not into the garage.
Yes, that's correct. It does align with the hallway, the main corridor of the building.
Okay, good. That was the right decision. We don't want people to walk through the parking garage and able to walk into the neighborhood. We want them to walk from the beautiful interior of their building right outside into Lowell. All right, good to hear. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Joe, would it be possible for you to pull up an aerial on that, an aerial view on that? I want to get a little better understanding of this Is that your laptop that's hooked to, or is that theirs?
Peter, what's it? Ask.
Would it be possible for you guys to pull up an aerial view of a map on here?
Let me see if I have it here.
What I'm going for here, I want to try to get a better understanding of what you're talking about with this connection to the Bruce Freeman Trail. I am leaning very heavily towards more sidewalk down Lowe's Way, potentially even going to the, probably, I would say, I'm leaning towards taking it all the way down to Industrial Ave. But if there's, that's not quite, but, okay. But if there's some other, like, what are you, okay,
It's this, you're talking
what
about
are
this.
you? Now, when you talk about connecting to the Freeman Trail, is that the railroad track that would
This is-
potentially be the extension of the Freeman Trail?
This is the connector, and this is the railroad track. It goes right underneath and across here. We have about 200 feet of frontage right at this southeast corner of this parking lot. This is 59 Lowe's Way. That's why we were proposing that sidewalk to go to 59, and then this is an existing sidewalk, and then either coming across the parking lot and down, because there's a slope differential between the parking lot and the former railroad bed. So we're gonna have to use this, if there's an existing drain line that comes down here, we're gonna have to run that bike path or sidewalk to the Freeman Trail down that way in some fashion. So we were thinking, rather than running the sidewalk up here and then down, because people take the shortest distance, they don't use sidewalks. Even if you build them sometimes, which is evidence. I've looked at these sidewalks that exist out on Wellman Street, and there's a sidewalk that goes to Stairway Plaza.
Yeah.
They walk right up the landscape slope, right across the street, don't even ignore the crosswalks, the sidewalks, everything that's provided. So that's our kind of our thought process on it. Rather than them cutting across this landscaped island, we'd rather them define a sidewalk in that landscaped island to 59 and then down to the potential Freeman Trail bike path. That's kind of our initial thought process on it.
And now, because what I was noticing, looking at the aerial on my little phone, is that the railroad bed, which could become the trail extension, extends down and meets Industrial Ave on,
The Cross Point side.
yeah, on the Cross Point side. As you're looking at, that's the chemical business you were talking about earlier, right? That fronts on Industrial Ave?
Yeah.
Right.
It goes right to the side of that
It's-
facility, I think.
Right, it comes
Yeah.
down the right side of that building. So if we're talking about pedestrian access from
Cross
this new
Point.
development to, say, Cross Point and the theaters and things, a connection from their project to a trail on that railroad bed, and then continuing, which then continues down to Industrial Ave, would provide just as good pedestrian access for that purpose to get to Cross Point as continuing the sidewalk all the way down Lowe's Way to Industrial Ave.
And just from a, just a usability perspective, I don't like traveling across along sidewalks abutting roadways. If I can meander it through a landscaped island, I feel a lot safer, because I have that buffer from the roadway to the sidewalk that I'm traveling on. And that's exactly what
Especially in like a suburban type of situation. It's not,
I don't
walking along
have
an urban
that.
sidewalk is if it's a different matter.
Trying to look for that plan. But it's on the previous plan. If you look at the traffic exhibit, I don't know if you have it in front of you there, but we show that proposed sidewalk from 41 Wellman to 59 Wellman, cutting across that existing landscaped island, not following along Lowe's Way extension, per se.
That's the proposal you showed us last meeting.
Yes, yeah,
Yep.
that's correct.
On the other hand, if we were to require the sidewalk all the way down Lowe's Way to Industrial Ave, we'd know that it would get built in relatively short order as part of this project. Whereas if we hung our hats on some sort of a connection to the Bruce Freeman Trail, that would depend on when the city would improve that trail. Okay. I'm just working through my thoughts here. Okay. You know, something that, all right, moving on. Let's move on to Wellman Street. The, potential of closing the left lane with this, with this pork chop island, or the left turn, or with this, or even just with signage and rules. Has anybody run this by Lowe's? Because I suspect that on a Saturday, there's a lot of people who pull out of Wellman and want to take that turn at Chelmsford. And it's actually a feasible thing to do that on Saturday at 11 o'clock, as opposed to, say, on a weekday at 8:30. It's 8:30 a.m. There's certainly a hazard there. There's certainly something, especially if we're going to be bumping up the traffic, the number of vehicles like this, that it needs to be addressed somehow. I'm wondering if there's some other option for how to take care of the that, which wouldn't forbid those left turns. You know, no left turns, you know, these hours, these days, signs possibly would do it. On the other hand, one advantage to having the pork chop island is that it could also serve as a pedestrian refuge for the crossing. You know what I mean? You're putting in a crosswalk there. Yet another thought occurs to me is that now that we've switched the sidewalk to the north side of Wellman, do we still want the crosswalk across Chelmsford Street to be on the south side of Wellman? Joe?
Yeah, the reason why the crosswalk is on the south side of Wellman is, I think there's a gentleman's driveway on the north side, so you really technically shouldn't have a crosswalk going into somebody's
No.
driveway. You want an ADA ramp, you know, so you want to build it right. That's why it's up there. But I think having the sidewalk on Wellman on the south side, because I think a lot of people that move into those apartment buildings, you have the bank at the Stairway Plaza, you have the Connector Cafe, you have, so people would be going there quite a bit, I think.
Yes.
But yeah, the crosswalk has to be sort of up there, because that's the only place where we really have the sidewalk.
Yeah, okay. I would find it really helpful for to have some professional thought put into the design there at Wellman and Chelmsford in terms of that island, whether it can be a pedestrian refuge, options for where the crosswalk can go. Is there a way to work around that driveway, angling it a little bit? Yeah. Getting back to the access and the circulation issue. What I heard earlier was that, was this concern expressed about that the industrial property owner that occupies the corner lot of Lowe's Way and Industrial. Now, he currently has his access onto Industrial, not Lowe's Way, right?
Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Onto Industrial, okay. The recommendation which the applicants reacted so strongly to was that right to pass and repass would be granted to all abutters on Wellman Ave and Lowe's Way. Would the applicant have that same objection if the language said to all abutters on Wellman?
I didn't hear the last part of that.
If that language was changed from providing right to pass and repass to all abutters on Lowe's Way and Wellman, if that language was changed to the right to pass and repass granted to all abutters on Wellman Street, and not to all abutters on Lowe's.
Well, I think I can't speak for the client, number one. Number two, I think this is one of the issues that we're all trying to have the peer review for, to really get some good ideas about what is the right way to handle that. I think that's a legitimate question that should be posed to these gentlemen to hash out and see what they say. I flunked traffic engineering 1-2, but as I've sat here and read and listened to all of this, George Eliotti's solution to this problem is very simple. All of the problems with Wellman Street and traffic and running this and that, whatever, close off the access to, close off once and for all Wellman Street where it is there. Make it a dead end there, make it serve the people there, don't let any of the people on the other side get into it, and I think you've solved an awful lot of turning problems, twisting problems, whatever. Remember, I said I flunked traffic engineering 1-2, but I certainly would like someone to tell me why that isn't. The professionals, when they do that, I would ask them why they shouldn't do that. Makes sense to me. That way you're keeping all that traffic off of Wellman Street, if everyone's concerned about all those trips. We all know that everyone's going to go down Lowell's Way. It's a logical way. It's the only logical way. I remember Mr. Malovich saying, who the heck, you go, if you want to go up to Chelmsford, you have so many other options that do that one way or another. So you get down to Lowell's Way, you turn right up to Chelmsford Street, and you're at the intersection, which has been very nicely done since we fixed Lowe's, and I say we because I was so involved in all of that. You got 3 sections there and whatever. So I don't see where Wellman is that big a problem. The nice part of it is it leaves the whole street for the guy who owns all of the property there to do with whatever he wants to do, access, egress, etc. But that's just the guy who flunked traffic engineering.
It seems like, from the city's perspective, that the access that we're worried about is, and the value that would be gained is from granting that access to the properties on Wellman Street, not necessarily to all the properties on Lowe's Way. I would like to, I think that possibility should be brought up in future discussions between the city and the applicant. Maybe that's a way around the problem. Let's see, what else did I have? Yes.
Can I address your comment?
Yes.
So I think the issue for us as the property owner is that we don't know what's going to happen on Wells Way in the future, Wellman Street, excuse me. We are more concerned about our office tenants walking back and forth across And I think bringing more traffic through that site doesn't make sense. I mean, you've got Cross Point next to us with a 3,000 car parking lot. Would you put a street through that parking lot? That's effectively what you're asking us to do. I can't see the reason to do that.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to ask Nick this question about this, these disparate trip generation numbers. In terms of what we need to be concerned about, what conditions we'd put on this, what improvements should be made to Lowell's Way, or made to Wellman Street, made to the intersection, what difference does that difference make? What's the difference in what we should be, I'm thinking in terms of whether the access, the level of service at Lowell's Way and Industrial, whether that intersection is adequate. Why is that difference important to us? Where would it show up in terms of what we need to change?
Okay, so the difference in the trip generation, like I said, I'm estimating about 60% higher during the peak hours. So in the morning peak hours, I'm estimating about 196 vehicles coming out of there, and then they have about 121. So that is a significant difference. I mean, you're talking 75 cars. Difference. That's a lot of cars. If you start thinking, the peak hour has within that peak hour there's a peak 15-minute period.
Yep.
So that's 75 cars. That's a lot of traffic. And then in the PM peak, I have about 90 more cars than they do. 90 cars is a lot of cars. And then you start putting these at the intersection of Lowell's Way and Industrial Avenue. That's really not too bad because it has good service. It functions well. The intersection up the street at Stevens in Chelmsford, that's a congested intersection. So we want to know exactly how many cars, how bad it's going to be, because that way we can ask. That's why I asked the applicant. I think suggestion number 6 was, look at these numbers and look at these figures and figure out how bad is traffic going to be at the intersection of Stevens and Chelmsford, and also at Wellman Street, and also down at Plain and Chelmsford. Because those 3 intersections on Chelmsford, those are the ones that worry me. And what happens is if they say, well, don't worry about it, we're not creating that much traffic, they build it, and then all of a sudden we have real problems at these intersections, it's going to be on the city to come up with fixes, and it's going to come to us to fix these problems.
Okay.
When if we have good numbers now, we can figure out what the problems are and what possible solutions are, and then we can ask for some mitigation so that we're not stuck fixing a problem.
So it wouldn't, so those differences in estimates, that wouldn't make a difference in terms of anything that's on any of these plans, what the improvements on Lowell's Way should look like, what the improvements along Wellman should look like, what the pork chop island would look like, those would all be the same.
Well, the Wellman-Chelmsford intersection might be a little different, but the sidewalks and the striping, that's all the same on Lowe's and Wellman. That wouldn't change, really.
Okay, so it's potential off-site mitigation.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Actually, if I might, if it's okay, if I could add something to the chair, is that okay?
Please.
Okay. And I just wanted to add a little bit of what that 60 cars delta would be, because you asked really what the difference is. So if you put in perspective, and I tried to do that, I think, during the first meeting of putting cars' perspective to minutes. So if you have 60 cars over a course of an hour, that's 1 minute. And then you have cars going out different directions. Are they going to go out Lowe's? Are they going to go out Wellman Street? So then, it might be less than half of that. So you're talking about 1 car a minute total coming out, and then that's split to the other driveways. So, just to put it in perspective, that's all. Thank you.
Actually, it's 240 cars an hour.
So,
Difference?
No, it's total.
Yeah.
So
right,
it's-
right, he was talking
yeah.
about the difference between your
All right.
numbers and his.
But it's,
Right.
so just put in perspective too, I mean, we're talking about 240 units and we're looking at 1 hour. So in 1 hour time, that's saying every apartment is gonna have a car coming out in a 1 hour time. So that's,
Okay, okay, those are my things, items, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Mr. Snetsky?
I'll be brief because I think we've covered most of the issues, but I want to make a couple of comments. First, I'd like to thank Nick for his insightful comments and the effort that he's put into this, as well as the applicant. And I appreciate the offer for the peer review because I think that will help us evaluate, all the issues. But I've been consistent, I believe, from our beginning of the discussions on this, that safety and the traffic are the concerns that I've had. And I do rely on our staff to look out for the best interest of the city, as is our job sitting here on this board. One other point that I did want to bring up on the fire department comment, I took a look at the chapter that he cited, and, to just so I knew what he was talking about, and it's part of the Mass Comprehensive Fire Safety Code. And that section states that the fire apparatus access road plans must include an analysis and evaluation of fire apparatus maneuvers throughout the access roads created by sweep path analysis and term simulation software. So while we're putting these other pieces together, I'd like to just make sure that that particular requirement that was brought up by the deputy chief be met, as part of the code. That's all I have to say at this time.
Thank you. I just have two brief comments. One, I'm happy to see the new pedestrian access, and two, I'm happy to hear that you're requesting a peer review.
Yeah,
That's all I have to say.
that's what's,
I think all the traffic stuff that we talked about tonight, a lot of it's gonna be mitigated by next time we meet.
right.
I don't have any concern who you want to pick for the peer review. Obviously, we will have to continue, to get the peer review, we'd have to have a continuance on this matter. How long it will take to get the peer review, I don't know. I don't know what you have in names for who you have on board. We've done a peer review once before in the city, and it worked out very, very well. I can't think of the woman that we had. Remember Joe over in Walgreens?
Yeah, I can't remember her name. She was
I know
through
we have it in the
TEC,
file.
but I can't remember.
Yeah.
Very good.
And then we have other people who've been, we know Jeffrey Dirk knows the city pretty well. So, I mean, whatever names they want to submit, obviously, they can work with DPD on regards to who they want to get for the peer review. But we've done it once before and it worked out very well.
But we want to submit 3 names. We want to make the.
Yeah, that's
fair
fine. I mean, you can
kind
submit them, let staff make comments on them if they want to do them. If not, like I said, we've used,
That's a good idea.
the one we used for that Walgreens up on Middlesex Street, which,
Aurora Bridge, yeah.
Well, I think,
that worked out very, very well.
I think there was also a different one for the charter school, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure,
Yeah,
but.
but the one, but the one on the Walgreens that we got a lot of heat on, once it was finalized, people were surprised how well it worked.
Yeah.
They were hard to tell us that it worked as well as they worked, because they were very hard to accept that, but in the long run, they would say it softly.
I think one of our recommendations would be TEC. I think they're the ones that did the Walgreens, period.
Okay, oh, okay, yeah, 'cause I know there's I forget the name of the company, but the woman came, whoever that was, but I'm sure whoever you make a recommendation with, that would be fine. I mean, send it to staff, obviously, then look at somebody who's credited. I mean, obviously, there's certain standards, not gonna have somebody who flunked, traffic 1 and 101, 102. I mean,
We don't need that.
so I mean, obviously, you have to be, so I'll just ask the applicant how much time you have to need for the peer review, how much time you want. It sounds like we're gonna, to get that, we'll need a continuance date, so I don't know how long that takes.
If I remember,
I mean, maybe the traffic people would know better than we would. Maybe Nick and the other traffic engineer would know what a new person coming in, start to look from scratch, start it over, look at both comments, I don't know how long that takes. I
think
know one
last
thing, it
time-
won't take 2 weeks.
I think last time we took 2 months.
Yeah, I mean, it
If
took
I
a little
remember
while.
It does.
Mr. Wynn tells me realistically, we're probably talking start to finish 3 or 4 weeks, which is gonna
I'd
be
say
a
at least.
huge.
Yeah, I'd say
Fine
you're
loss,
talking at
yeah.
least a month, minimum. Because a new person coming in, take it up to date, they have to look at all the information from Nick, all the information from them, then they're gonna have to sit down with both of them, and then make a new set of plans, a new draft, a new set of comments. I mean, we can give out a proposed date in mind with the idea if they need more time, give them that date, you can send a letter to us requesting more time,
Right.
you know, because if it's not up to date and you come in, we're gonna ask for another date.
Why don't we shoot for 2 meetings from now, Mr. Chairman? That should be a month, right?
Okay. So let me think, we're looking, so either we could go to,
As long as we're not getting into summer schedule.
Six-
that-
no,
May
we can go to the
16th.
end of May or the first week of June, whatever you want.
6th,
May 16th or June 6th.
you got May 2nd, then May 16th, then June 6th.
I'd say June 6th.
May 2nd, May 16th, May 16th, I think we
I
should.
don't think May 16th, you can make, I think June 6th would be better off,
June 6th, okay, June.
right?
I'm fine as long as somebody passes on my suggestion about shutting off Wellman.
Well, I'd suggest you start, you know, I don't know, speak with your people, and, as they say, have your people speak with their people, and,
Everyone's concerned about the traffic on there and the kids or whatever, be a nice walking zone for the kids.
whichever, I mean, if that's what,
That's what we need.
but, you wanna make a motion, June 6th? Joe, how we doing on the time-wise on this? Did they need an extension, time to be signed?
We probably should get an extension.
Can you sign an extension? Because usually if we don't act in so many days, that we act accordingly, that you're requesting more time?
I'm
We need-
sorry.
We need an extension request from you in writing?
Sure,
Okay,
sure,
all
absolutely.
right. So if somebody wants to make that in the form of the motion with that requirement?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we continue the matter until the June 6th meeting, with the understanding that the applicant will, that a peer review will be performed at the expense of the applicant, and the engineering firm will be selected by DPD, and that the applicant will sign the waiver for the extension of time, in which a decision would be made by the planning board.
I'll second the motion.
Motion's made in second. All in favor?
Aye?
Chair votes yes. Good luck. We'll see you all again. Good night.
That's the right thing.
See how fast we get it done, Mr. Chairman?
I hear you.
And you notice, I just can't draw a crowd anymore.
All right,
Okay. Thank you, Nick, for your services tonight. I appreciate it.
yeah.
I know the other board
Good
members
job,
do
Nick.
as
Good
well.
job.
You know, I know you're here to make recommendations, they make recommendations, and the bottom line, we'll vote. But it's very helpful to hear. And hopefully the peer review will help shine some light. And have you ever dealt with those before, when you have an independent person come in, Nick, or? Yeah, see, we did one, well, see, what happened was when we had the one up on Middlesex Street was, what happened was, the city manager and the council, they didn't want to put the project out to bid. Okay? So then they come in, people took over the project, and they bid the project. So now, the question come up, you know, is if the city council and the city manager requested this go to bid, and the city traffic engineer who works for them, you know, and they kind of boxed in a little bit with what Attorney Claremont, who was on the board with us at the time, said, you know, maybe a third party taking this new satellite might work. And it did.
Yeah.
Because they're saying, you're really putting the, you know, the council and the manager saying, yeah, put this out, put the bid on it, do the whole thing, develop the lead, come back, and then, you know, then the engineers, like, city traffic engineers, like, well, so instead of putting them in that position, you're not even asking if they were in the position, recommendation came out of Attorney Claremont, who was with us for over 10 years, and as a result of that, they brought in this one company, and man, this stuff worked out. I mean, it was a surprise to everybody. I mean, so we had a good result of it. We've only done it once. I know it had been allowed in our regs, and I know it kind of recent to our regs. It hasn't been there for a long time. Remember, we kind of like put that in afterwards, Joe, after we thought about it?
Yeah,
We're saying, gave us the authority to do it, maybe put that in there so we could ask for it, so it's not like a total surprise. And by doing it that one time, it really helped. I mean, suggestions came up that a third party thought of that the other two didn't, and then their comment was filtered through, and so hopefully and then like I say, to me, the main thing for us to vote is, we look at your checkpoint, look at their checkpoint, and narrow it down. And then if we focus it down to, okay, there's 10 issues that you agree or disagree on, then we make a recommendation with or without those conditions. I mean, with all, none, or some. And that's the bottom line for us. So that's why I like your recommendations, and that's why I ask, on most site plans, I ask the applicant, go through the city comments first before I turn it over to anybody else, because we've all read them, we're all thinking about it, we're all gonna ask the same questions about it, get it out first, and then whatever questions we have left, it's easy to pick at it than each one of us going through it at a time.
Go through them, say yes,
Yeah, and then, for example,
that was
we
good.
could go along and say, all right, I'm gonna make a motion that either with all these conditions you said, or those, and then we discuss the thing, and then like you say, if, for example, on one of them says, one wants it the Lowe's Way, one wants it the industrial, one's one the building 59, well, then it's a compromise, we'll work that out. I mean, but, at least we know there's three different intentions, and, it's going somewhere, but that's not, I don't think that's a major concern as some of the other concerns are, with that, how the sidewalk goes down. But, at least it's like something that, once we know where the city engineers stands, you stand, they stand, then we can make a recommendation on that. But some of the other ones, after this adamantly no, then on site plan, we can still make them a condition or not. They can either live with it or not live with it. But that's up to the applicant, right?
Just for clarification too, Joe, are they going to the ZBA for the special permit after they get through this process? Is that?
They
yes.
have to go to CBA.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're scheduled there yet because of what's going on with us, or
Yeah,
they postponed already?
They had originally postponed it, I believe, to May 9th, but I imagine they'll postpone it again
Postpone it again, yeah.
with the
Yeah,
ZBA for
because,
another month.
because
there.
when we had the pre-app, they already had the date here and the date with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so concluding with that, so again, I just wanted to thank Nick. So moving along on the agenda, anybody have any further follow-ups? I know Joe gave us some materials for May 2nd, and is there more than just May 2nd here, Joe? I haven't met him yet.
Yeah, there's two applications in there. One is for May 2nd. It's a new item. It's for 2 single-family homes. The property is split between Lowell and Drakeit.
Oh, yeah,
So-
okay, that's the one we seen in Christine's email, right?
Yeah, so the roadway and the front approximately 10 feet of the property lies in Drakeit, and the remainder of the property lies in Lowell. So the houses will be located in Lowell, but they'll have Drakeit addresses because it's Drakeit Road. So they couldn't file an A&R, we couldn't sign an A&R in Lowell because it's not our frontage. So they had to file a definitive subdivision, even though they're not creating any new roadway. So it was a little bit complicated, but we figured out how they could apply for it. They'll meet all the lot area requirements, all setbacks and everything, but the process for them to do it was a definitive subdivision.
So do they have to go to Drakeit as well as us then?
Yes, they
Because
went
we
to
had one
Drakeit
once
first.
before on Hildreth Street, I believe, heading out by that shopping plaza on the left before you get there, and they had to go before both boards, yeah.
Yes, they went to Drakeit first, and
Remember that was a
now
while
they're
ago?
coming
I
here.
do remember that one, yeah. That
And
was a
then
while ago.
the second item is on,
Maybe says, it's not gonna get any mail, but that's a, get a PO box.
the second item in your pack is actually for May 16th, but it's a bigger project, so we want to get it to sooner. It's over on the Lowell 5 site, or well, the ex-Lowell 5 site, over by the AOC garage. It's proposed private dormitory over there.
Is that the church, Fred Street
Fritzy's
Church?
Church, that
Fred Street
funny
Church
looking
building?
building, yeah.
National Bank
Yeah.
building.
Oh, wow.
That's the
Or is
one.
it Fred Street Church behind, to the right of the parking garage? Yeah.
Right.
Across from the high school?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
So with it being a larger development, they'll have to go in front of all 4 boards. I want to get it to you sooner rather than later. It's
Now,
approximately,
something like that new zoning that came before us, recommendation, was that approved by the council already? The one that came in for us, that, the sidewalks and all that for any schools?
that'll be for
yeah,
a school, but this is a dormitory.
Okay, so that wouldn't
So
affect,
it wouldn't affect this.
Oh,
it doesn't affect any of that part of that, no.
It's approximately, I believe, 438 beds, so it's fairly sizable.
How big is it? I'm sorry?
438 beds, if I remember the number correctly.
Right.
So it's fairly sizable dormitory, all private.
all private. Like-
Privately
like-
So similar to the one we've done before?
Yeah, out
Correct.
on,
Similar to the one on Marginal Street.
yeah.
Yep.
On Marginal, yeah.
Marginal
Yeah, how big was that on Marginal Street?
That started out at 500, and then they
It
put
went
an
up.
addition
That's what-
on
that worked
of
out
another
very
300, so it went up to about 800 beds.
Yeah, we put that second phase on. The biggest thing on Marginal was getting over that bridge. the
Yeah.
railroad.
Yeah, I bought that.
Yeah, the bridge
I mean,
thing
and
didn't work.
they said working with the railroad is the hardest thing in the world to get a hold of them.
I like that
But
project.
having that deal, putting that bridge over, they have the buses right there to move all the people, having, if they have to walk all around through those filters in neighborhoods,
Yeah.
very happy when they get the approval and to go over that bridge.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And actually, if you go up there and look it over, it really works. Yeah, which is, it's nice, I mean, it makes that work. Okay. So do you have anything further? If not, I'll turn it over to any board members at this time.
You got it.
Any board members have any follow-ups?
I have just one quick item. Our next historic board meeting is on May 9th. I haven't confirmed this with Steve, but I believe we're going to be looking at this same student housing
Okay.
project. He's been working with them, I know, but I haven't, and he said last week or sometime that looks like the 9th they'll be ready. Nice project. And hopefully we'll do it then, and then we can get it.
We did receive one other thing, oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
All right, I'm done.
okay. We did receive one other thing from Judy. It was about the Green Building Commission. They changed the name and
Yeah,
they
and
no
they-
longer
nobody
require
from
a
the
planning board
planning
member
board.
and they have to apply
Yeah.
and hold signs or something to get on the board or something?
Yeah, under their new name change,
Yeah.
they're now the Sustainability Council.
I saw that, I think I have them with all this paperwork, but I figured-
Right, and as a part of that change to their
Seems like a
makeup,
mistake to
there's
me.
no longer a requirement that a planning board member has to sit on it.
I think Bob was on it from our representative, wasn't he, Mr. Malovich? Yeah.
Yeah.
So is he already off that, or is his term
I
expired before
guess
this
so.
starts, or?
Right,
Bob
as-
know he's no longer on there, or?
Yeah, I guess he's no longer on there as of
Sounds like
time
what, the
the
person would have to
council voted.
apply to get on that
Yeah,
process, and who makes the final decision on the
I think
acceptance?
I think it's the council. I think when they made that vote for the change, they established how many members would be on there and who they would be. So I don't know if there are any vacancies.
Hopefully Bob doesn't take the news too bad, I mean,
Hopefully not.
Oh,
all right. Anybody else have any follow-up? If no, we can recommend a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made and second. We are adjourned. Good night, and thank you very much, everyone.
But I can